Immediately almost. Yo. What's crack-a-lacking, everybody? Hope your day's going good. Hope your week has been good so far. Appreciate everyone joining us on this Wednesday edition of the Logistics Lounge. Today, school is in session, and we mean that literally. We have got two incredible minds with us today. We have Jason Miller and Steve Viscelli. Both of them are professors in logistics at rival universities. No, I'm just joking. But we're going to get them on the show, ask them some cool questions, get them to dig into and talk about their passion and the things that make them get up out of bed in the morning and want to teach this stuff to all you youngins out there. Also, in the news, we got an update on some truck parking, man, and some of our taxpayer dollars actually getting used for some good truck parking, man. So, hey,
what?
It's good shit. I'm serious. So sit back, relax, pop a top, and enjoy the lounge.
The views and opinions expressed on this show by its guests are not necessarily those of Lounge Media Group or the show host. So if you sue someone, make sure it's the party responsible for hurting your feelings. Also, grow up, be an adult, and understand not everyone thinks like you. And that's okay.
Dude, that disclaimer is like the greatest thing ever.
I was just about to say, dude, every time I hear it, I love it more and more. It is just so on par with the lounge.
The funny thing about it is every time I think about it, I think about this episode of The Simpsons. I think Family Guy also did a take on it, but it was an episode where Homer walked around and had his own theme song the entire show. And so, like, whenever he walked into a room, this random theme song would play. And so if I had to pick a theme song, that would be my theme song every time I walked into a room.
Someday we are going to hire a full jazz band just to play that intro. Like, we'll hire him for 30 seconds just so we can walk out on stage.
Well, I'm speaking directly about the disclaimer part. Like,
yeah. We'll hire someone to do that too. Yeah. Might have a guy.
Yeah, might have a guy. That's right. How you doing, Mr. Hound? How's your hump day going?
It's going, man. Just getting in some last minute freight. Next week's like our last operating week for deliveries before the holidays. So trying to get it in where I can and, loosen or tighten up those loose knots before we get to go and wait for Mr. Santa Claus to bring us all the goodies and gifts and joys and pleasures of Christmas time. So, yeah, man, snowed last night here in Tennessee, rocking and rolling. And it's like 50 degrees outside. So, yeah, we're back in the bullshit weather of Tennessee. But other than that, man, beautiful day to be in the lounge. How's your day been?
It is a beautiful day to be in the lounge. My day's been good, dude. It's been busy. Been busy. I'll tell you this. For losing that customer I did, man, like, oh my God, I still feel like I'm busy as I was with them, man, with this seafood customer I got. They're just like, they're blowing up, man. And now I'm at the point that I'm saving their ass and I'm rubbing it in their face every chance I get. Like literally, I was talking
subtly.
No, I literally was talking shit to the guy today, bro. Because his truck didn't get in there because they had a problem with it. And I told him, I was like, man, I said, tisk, tisk, tisk. I said, you know what? I said, you just need to get rid of all those trucks and just let me take care of everything. And I'll help you save all of that money on all those truck payments. And he was like, what? He's like, whatever, Pedro. And I'm like, all right, Mitch. All right, you just wait. But anyway, so crazy busy with that. Dude, the tides have turned. The customer that I lost last year that started like my bad luck, I feel, I got that customer back.
Yeah, you told me that, dude. That's
awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm
telling that. We manifested that shit, man. But with those changes that were going on, I told you, man. I told you things were about to turn around for the best.
I think this is the sign, because this customer started the bad luck. You know what I mean? And now, getting it back, I hope it's going to make everything turn back. It's like boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? So I'm happy.
Company
dude.
makes a world of difference, man.
Yeah, it does, man. All right, let's go ahead and chop on a quick sponsor break and get to some news. Talk about this update on truck parking. And man, look at that. Truck parking in the news, truck parking as a sponsor, truck parking everywhere. Freight Ninja. All right, let's get to some news. Okie dokie, artichoke. Some good news for truck drivers and taxpayers. Connecticut Department of Transportation rolled out plans for a project to significantly increase truck parking statewide in the next several years. Last week, CTDOT announced $31 million project to increase the state's public truck parking capacity by 44%. The project will add 180 truck parking spaces over 5 locations. Those will be in Middletown, Madison, Southington, Southbury, and Vernon. These additional spaces will increase Connecticut's current 420 spaces to about 600. Officials say that the first phase of the project is underway at the Middletown Rest area located northbound on I-91, where they will be adding 11 spaces to that place. Rest of the truck parking expansion project, like I said, will be completed in phases over the next several years. A quote from someone said that during COVID-19 pandemic, we heard truckers loud and clear when they called for places to safely park along state highways. Oh, sorry, that was Connecticut Department of Transportation Commissioner Garrett. I didn't even go try to pronounce that last name. And he said, so we are excited to bring these projects forward to improve safety for the trucking community who are responsible for keeping our economy moving. Love to see this, man. I do. Even though, again, it's just rest areas, and like I really think that in the private hands we can do something better with this and provide a little bit, better thing than still being on the side of a highway, which rest areas are hardly ever near where freight picks up or delivers. You know what I mean? So, but hey, at least the money is actually going towards what it's supposed to, and that they're adding a pretty good amount of things, man. From 400 to almost 600, dude. That's a lot of spaces. Connecticut's not a very big state, so they don't have as many rest areas. I thought they would have said in here how many they have, but they don't. So from the sounds of it, pretty much a majority of their sizable rest areas are going to get some additional truck parking. So hey, that is an absolute win, and we all know the Northeast is where it is needed the most. So
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely a step forward, man. People talking about all this money getting put into this issue that has been one of the biggest topics of the trucking industry for God knows how long, the past year, 2 years, and so good on you, Connecticut. Hopefully, other states start taking notice of it.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm surprised that it's actually being put to use so quickly too. I did want to put that. I know they've had a few other states that have kind of trickled some stuff out from, like the first round of this funding that went out, I believe, near the end of COVID, if I'm not mistaken. So it's good that they've gotten this money from this current round that happened, I believe, this year. And they've already started putting that money to use. So yeah, applause. Good stuff. And it also, man, we also got to realize that it generates. Can't think of the word. It helps the local economy. Obviously, these construction companies, stuff like that. Even though they're state contractors, you know what I mean.
Supports the local businesses.
Yeah, it's a good thing all around, man. Very, very happy.
That's crazy though. 11 spots. Like, how much are these people charging? Like,
well, I mean, I agree, but I mean, I don't know, they're at 180, so I mean, 31 million dollars, you know what I mean? Let's do the math there real quick. 31 million divided by 180. That's that's $172,222 a freaking spot, man. God, Jesus Christ.
That's crazy.
There's your government at work for you right there. I mean, but still, good thing. Let's not talk crap. They're still doing good thing, right? Anything you want to add on that? Done.
Yeah, man.
Right.
It's great.
Wonderful.
I'm glad to see it happening.
Me too. Let's bring these two wonderful gentlemen on stage and get this party rolling. Without further ado, Steve and Jason, everybody. It's the only school song I could find that everyone knows. Okay, give me a break here.
Hey, I love it.
Give me a break. How you doing, gents?
Good, guys. It's nice to be back in the lounge with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, Jason, we appreciate it. Steve, it is very good to have you back officially with the lounge. We had you first with Gord, Voice of Gord. That was absolutely an amazing show, and so we definitely wanted to get some private time with you. Jason, man, dude, so grateful that you're here with us as well. Dude told Steve complete shot in the dark, and I still think that Steve, you were the reason he agreed. As I think if it just would have been some rando on LinkedIn, he'd have been no. But I was like, Steve, he's like, okay, at least I know that guy. So
Who's this potato guy?
Yeah, it's a potato guy. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get right into things because we have got so much that we are going to be able to talk about, and I don't know what type of time we have to go, so we want to just touch on as much as we can. First question that we ask everyone, Steve, you go first, but that is, who is Steve Viscelli and Jason Miller, and how did you both get to be where you are in the academia field? And specifically with the logistics.
Yeah, thanks. Well, again, it's great to be here in the lounge with you guys. So I'm an economic sociologist, and it was totally random how I started studying trucking. I think it had to do something to do with the fact that my dad ran a truck gate when I was a kid at a factory. So he'd run the scale, weigh people in and out, and I'd go visit him at work, see the big rigs, all that stuff, and then. Went to graduate school to, figure the world out, and was studying, the economy, capitalism, et cetera, and regulation, and picked up this book by Michael Belzer called Sweatshops on Wheels. Some of your viewers may be familiar with it. And, heard about the, significant declines in earnings that truckers had experienced post deregulation. And I just thought, I wonder if they noticed and what they think about it. And, roughly 20 years later, I'm still talking to truck drivers about their careers and their work and how they feel about it.
Lovely. Steve,
What about you, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, so my dad was a driver. He was a leased owner operator back in the 80s, from about 82 to 86. Hauled a lot of steel out of Cleveland to Baltimore for export and back. Then he would usually end up, after enough time, carriers figure out, hey, maybe this guy can do some paperwork. So he did a lot of dispatch. Then he ended up working for International as a sales engineer, even though he had no engineering background. So, the days before you actually needed a specific degree for a job like that. And so I grew up around trucks more on the sales side and kind of the broader economic side. And then I ended up getting my PhD totally on a whim. I was in undergrad. It was 2009. So the midst of the financial crisis. Was working out one day at the gym, small school. So the faculty were at the gym at the same time. A couple of them said, why don't you get a PhD? I had no idea what I was doing and ended up getting in. And I got into trucking research. One of my mentors had a project. And, it's interesting. Steve mentioned Mike Belzer's book. for me, the book that really got me excited was Lawrence Ouellette's Pedal to the Metal, by another sociologist who had been a truck driver for a number of years, just like Steve was. And he had written, I thought, man, this is an interesting topic. And that was right when the CSA program launched. And so I was a statistician by training. Government throws up tens of thousands of data points. You have a match made in heaven, and one thing led to another.
Yeah, though I think we both should get into truck parking. I'm interested in the economics of truck parking and whether or not we should start picking up some of these government contracts.
Dude, we should, we have said it forever. There's got to get some of them government contracts. Truck park's a good one, though, especially if, man, I'm going to say especially because I'm not an analytics guy, but I would assume if you like analytics, there is some good information in that stuff. Because we were talking about price per spot. Like there are companies out there that a big majority of their business now is consulting stuff for the truck parking industry on like what it literally costs to put a paved spot to fit 75 feet. It's nuts, man, the stuff that goes into it. But yeah. So where I want to kind of begin is something you both, well, Steve didn't mention it, but Jason mentioned it, and I know it's a thing with Steve, is the lease purchase stuff. Like, I really want to start there only because you mentioned it, and it's a good thing to get into. But, Steve, you had talked about the lease purchase stuff. It's one of the things that you've gotten into, So, Steve, talk about your stance on it. And then, Jason, I want to know if you have anything that you want to add to that, because I've seen some stuff that you wrote has been about lease purchase operators and the programs that they run.
Yeah, so the initial interest that I had, again, was sort of what had happened to wages. And, as I got into the research, took a job as a long haul driver and worked for about 6 months for a large carrier, the name of which I can't say, but all of you are familiar with this carrier's, operations and trucks, probably see them around all the time. And started talking to drivers and really didn't understand what was happening in the labor market in terms of contracting, and started to meet all these drivers who were, identifying as owner operators, which I was still, based on the reading I had done about the industry and what I knew about, truckers from, again, my dad and just life in general. I had this view of owner operators that, were these sort of independents, out, rural workers, finding loads, calling up brokers and, scrounging for freight. And of course, these lease operators were completely different. In fact, I couldn't distinguish them from myself in these larger operations. And so that ended up becoming the one of the main subjects of a book that I wrote in 2016, published in 2016, called The Big Rig. There's been quite a bit of attention to those lease purchase programs, as everybody knows, since then. And I've been on this truck leasing task force that the DOT established, a few years ago. We actually got started in 2023. We are just now submitting our final report, which will go to the DOT, Department of Labor, and to Congress. And for that, the committee was composed of a number of great folks, ranging from, again, independent owner operators to former carrier owners, some Teamster member, a few people from OIDA, some folks with experience with leasing. And, just to summarize it in two sentences, many of your viewers probably won't be surprised. You won't be surprised. We really didn't see a lot of evidence that these lease purchase programs are a significant avenue for drivers to end up owning a truck. I don't, this may not surprise folks out there, but we really didn't have, even the folks who submitted data to support the idea. Even that data suggested that very, very few people end up with a truck at the end of this. So, maybe 1 in 100 is sort of what we, was not inconsistent with the data that we saw. And so in light of that, this has already been published by Landline, has mentioned it several times. The committee ended up coming to the conclusion that the costs of these things did not that the benefits were not worth the cost, and that the primary recommendation would be that these things just shouldn't exist.
Well, I've even seen some examples. One of the drivers that drives for us, he was a part of a lease purchase program, finished it all the way out, and when he went to go leave the company, they refused to give him the truck. And so we had to hire lawyers to, go through all the process, which doesn't make sense at all. You sign that contract, you'd think it'd go through as agreed upon. But when it came down to it, they said, no, you're not taking this truck from us. Even though he had driven all of his miles, paid all of his payments, like how much do you see that on top of, the 1% out of, 100?
We heard from a number of drivers who told us stories like that, or that, revenue would just dry up as they were getting close to the end of that lease term. And so, turnover, and in the report, it will help you. There's data in the report, turnover rates of 300, 400% in a year for these programs are not unheard of.
Before we get into or I ask you, why you think some of that is, which a lot of it is obvious, but there are people out here who don't understand lease purchase. Jason, what's your take on it, man?
Yeah, it surprises me not in the slightest. I know the one National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine committee that I was on, we didn't tackle that specifically. We kind of stayed away from it, but the general sense of everybody on that committee was like, this is just a practice that is just too ripe for abuse. And so, Steve, what you're saying surprises me not in the slightest.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what is it that that you have found? And I'll obviously only talk about what you can talk about. I'm sure there's maybe some things that you can't. So, with discretion. What are some of the things that you found through your years of looking into this and being on this committee, why these things aren't set up for success?
Yeah, I mean, because the point of these programs, without a doubt, is to pay people less for their work. There's sort of this, there are a series of performances that happen at sort of the beginning and the end of these relationships, where drivers come in and maybe they go from one office to another, and they, form an LLC, and they sign a bunch of paperwork, and there's they go to an orientation with a bunch of slides about how they're going to buy the truck, and what the operations look like, etc. And it sounds like they're going to be an owner operator. It sounds like they're engaging in this this arrangement to end up buying a truck. But in the end, the only real difference that I've seen, and I've served as an expert witness in a number of class action lawsuits, and so I get to see all the pay data and operational data from the trucks, et cetera, is that these drivers end up working for anywhere from 20 to 30% less than a comparably experienced driver would, and the only difference is on payday, the costs of running that truck plus whatever the company decides the cost of quote buying the truck is, get deducted from the gross revenue, which the company has also determined before they get a net pay, right, for take home. And so when you kind of zoom out, if you took the words out and you just followed people around with maybe a drone or something for a few months, you wouldn't be able to distinguish these lease purchase drivers from employee, drivers driving a company truck in the vast majority of the cases, except on payday, when it hurts them pretty bad.
Yeah, those things are just horrible. I have never. Matter of fact, Ed Hunter is the only person I've ever met that finished a lease purchase.
That's who I was talking about.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like Ed is the only person I've ever met that has finished a lease purchase. And the word predatory is thrown around a lot in our industry, but it sucks because it's true. So many things are predatory in this industry, and these lease purchases, they are. I remember when I was at a mega carrier, I'm not going to say the name, but I've mentioned them on the show before. When I was there, they were driving the lease purchase stuff. And I knew two drivers that did it. And I was like, when they told me what their payments were and all this, and I was like, dude, it's like, you're literally making like 3 cents more a mile. If all of these projections are right, you're going to make, and back then I was making 34 cents a mile. So they were going to make like 37 cents a mile after all of their bills if the projections from this company was correct. It's like, dude, they've already bought this fucking truck and paid for it, man. This thing is theirs. It is 100% asset. You're literally about to rebuy this same truck from them, and they're going to pay you as a company driver to do it. Oh, it's like, and I think they would make a little more sense. Maybe people don't agree with this, but I think it would make a little more sense is if the driver could venture out, but they lock them into that carrier's freight, which is another problem. You can't lease with X carrier and then go to the load board and say, oh, well, I'm going to take a load that Jason has posted on here because it's paying me more than the trash you're giving me, so like they stop them at every chance they could have to actually be profitable and make money with that truck. So it's a disgusting thing. And I hope we do away with them, or at least just mandate the hell out of them, Steve, to where no company just even wants to waste their time with it.
Hey, I'd be interested in getting Indy's take on this. He said, Autumn Transport, they do the pneumatics and takers and all that, but it seems like it works for them. I know he's told me about a couple of their drivers that have actually gone through the program, no problem. But like he says, it is a rare case.
No, I think, you brought it up, Pedro. The key thing is at least if I'm a leased owner operator, but my loan is through a bank, I can do a 3-month term lease with you. And hey, you know what? This ain't working out. I'm going to go take my truck and go elsewhere. When you take that power away from that driver, it's a worse power dynamic situation than if you're an employee driver and hey, you got a decent driving record, you're going to be able to go find employment with minimal challenge, unless we're in like a 2009 type of, freight economy. Yeah. And so it puts the driver in the least powerful position possible.
We heard from, initially one of the concerns was, well, what about drivers who that's the only way they can access the truck? But as you're saying, Jason, that these markets exist for a reason. There are people who sell trucks, lease trucks, finance trucks, and the fact that you can't get that truck because you're in a bad financial position, et cetera, means that one, maybe you should think again before you get in there. Do you have the capital to weather a breakdown, a major, repair to the truck, some time off, like weeks off without pay, where you're still making a truck payment, insurance payments, things like that. But when you then, in that vulnerable position, give your employer, the ability to control how much you're making and, and determine all the charges you're going to pay, et cetera. It's just a situation that opens itself for all kinds of abuses. I think the 13th Amendment, in my reading of it, against indentured servitude, says that, these things shouldn't exist. Apparently, we haven't really legally tested this out. But essentially what we have is, employers holding, sometimes $150,000 worth of debt over workers' heads saying, yeah, you want to take this load or not? It seems problematic to me.
100%. And, we're going to touch on this throughout the thing, but, the common thing in our industry is that there are so many wrong practices that go on. And like, even though there's rules, they're not enforced, or no one even cares. Like, you think, like, how big of a red flag would it be, if you went to someone and to buy some major business, you know what I mean? And everything was dictated through them. All the financing was done through them. You had to use their bank. You had to get this. This was the payment, this is how all of these things, you had to pay X amount of this bill and that. You're like, wow, I have no control here. And then after you buy it, you can only be open between these hours and this hour. It's like no one would let that fly in any other industry. You know what I mean? In a capitalist society that we live in, that's just not the way it is. But in the trucking industry, it's very common that even owner operators are taken advantage of, you know what I mean? And that may be by brokers or shippers. Like, they all kind of hold leverage over a lot of these drivers' heads, man, one way or another.
Let's look at this the broker transparency thing that's going on right now. That is a law legally that brokers have to disclose whatever rate they are making from the shipper. However, And that fine print, when you sign that rate confirmation, cancels everything out. So I'm sure there's like all kinds of legalities going in the background in these things. But, you know, you need a job. Hey, it looks good. They'll, you know, primp you up a little bit, get you a nice little sign-on bonus, but then you're locked in the system.
Hey, you know, on that one, can we move along? Broker transparency. Steve, Jason, what do you guys have on either one? Steve, I ain't seen nothing from you. Jason, I don't think I've really seen anything from you. The one you got a stance on that right now?
I have posted on that. See, that's one where actually my statement to most small carriers is it doesn't matter if you know your broker's rate, because quite frankly, that rate's been negotiated between the shipper and the broker most likely. And you ain't going to get that rate if you go talk to that shipper, because I hate to say it, if you got 3 power units, somebody's shipping 500 loads a year, or let's pick a bigger facility, 2,000 loads a year out of a couple plants. They don't want to talk to you with your 3 trucks. Not to be mean, but those rates are set through a different marketing process. And so you as that carrier, I mean, we all know this. A broker can be underwater on a spot load if nobody wants to bid, versus they can make a ton of money because some carriers got a driver. They want to get him home. He's been away for 3 weeks. And you know what? I'm going to throw in $1.25 a mile because it's better than deadheading. And we know we're going to get that freight. So my statement is you've got so many other things to worry about. Knowing what your broker's making on profit standpoint really isn't that helpful. So to me, it's not something that is actually as important when you look at it as it may seem. And unfortunately, kind of building on this conversation, I guarantee you what we'll see happen is a whole bunch of small entities will pop up that for a fee will get you that information. They'll make a ton of money, but it ain't going to help you in your day-to-day business.
Boom.
Thank you for the business idea, Jason. I'm writing that down right
now. Trust me, you're not the only one that's been thinking that. I'm sitting here like,
Lounge Transparency Group.
Lounge Transparency. Steve, what about you, brother?
Well, my concern in this area, thinking about the policy is, the FMCSA, right? What would a mechanism look like for transparency? And, we often come up with some good rules, but what's the enforcement? When you've got a super fragmented, industry with thousands of operators that you might want to pay attention to, and then many more that, you just can't even think about trying to, keep tabs on. What's the enforcement mechanism? And right now, I mean, FMCSA can't even enforce hours of service and other stuff like that. So just putting more on that camel's back, I don't see it as realistic at this point.
Too, the other big thing is a lot of that original law came about in a day when the process looked so different, where the shipper paid the carrier and the carrier had to give the broker the commission. That is how the system used to work if you go back like 35, 40 years. Now it's completely different. And so what you have is, back during those days, of course, that transparency piece was important, but it was a lot for the broker to actually make sure they were getting their fair cut. And so now that the situation's reversed and most, a large share of freight's tendered from shipper to broker on a contract basis, knowing that rate's just it's not something that's that relevant for the day-to-day operations, because, hey, that broker may be getting $250 a mile because they're bringing in so much capacity. And yeah, you as the carrier, you're having to bid $210 a mile. You ain't going to go to that shipper and back solicit and get $210 a mile. They don't want to deal with you.
So I agree with everything you just said, Jason. Steve, you as well, man, about the policies and how we're going to take care of it and we can't force it, all of that. Here's my quick take on it. Is I kind of see that it's pointless to the rule is already on the books. Just nobody wants to do it. What the carrier is trying to accomplish here is to make their job that they have to do as far as the rule stands now easier, which is where it'll automatically be sent to them, so forth and so on. Here's pretty much everything you said is my point, Jason, is that, these big shippers, whatever, they don't want to deal with the little guys. They really don't. It is not worth their time. And, also these carriers think, oh, well, when I go back and run that lane again, I'll know what to charge the broker. Okay, well, how often do you run that lane? We're talking about spot freight here. How often are you on that lane? And okay, say you run it once a month. Well, depending on the lane, data changes every 72 hours. You know what I mean? Now, some of them that are ran less frequently, that's like on a 15-day turnaround or 30-day, but a majority of lanes, 7 days is the average turnaround rate. So we could be getting 2,100 to you right now. And then in a month, I'm actually getting 3,000, and you come back and ask me for that 2,100. I'm still going to say yes, or flip it. You know what I mean? The rate's gone down. Then you go to supply and demand, because if you, Mr. Carrier, found out that I'm getting $2,100 on a load, I'm paying you $1,900 for, and then you come back and you ask me for $2,050, I'm gonna just tell you no, and I'm gonna wait for someone that wants to do it for $1,900, and it's going to work every single time. I don't care what carriers say. And my other point that I've heard carriers say this is, oh, well, what we'll do is it'll give us the data so we can go to the shippers and we can take the freight. And it goes back to what Jason said. Not going to happen. And if you get rid of brokers, it's not going to happen what you think. Shippers are not all magically going to get DAT and truck stop subscriptions and start posting their loads, because they don't have the money and they don't have the people to deal with all of that headache type stuff. And for the people that say, oh, well, I'll just go to that big carrier, that big shipper, and take their stuff. Carriers in that position don't need this data, because they literally have a team of people that do nothing but comb through week over week, month over month, year over year data from the past 3 years, and they don't care about none of this stuff. So I don't think it's going to
also, dude, as a small carrier, that is not the freight I want. And I think that's a lot of what these carriers are missing is, like, your truck is your business. All right. Don't just go running freight. Like we've talked about this a million times. If a freaking truckload's paying $5 a mile going from Tennessee to Maine, we need to think about, you're probably not going to get shit out of Maine that's paying any money. So you're going to be stuck up there, or you're going to be running out for 90 cents a mile. Like, don't chase the money. But like, I don't care what the broker's making if I know my bottom dollar. If I know what I need to make take home, if the rate works for me, who cares what that guy's making? He's the salesman. I don't see carriers out here. There's a select few on LinkedIn that are actually out here hustling on LinkedIn, making their own sales calls, getting their own freight and really setting up those relationships. But if you're not doing that, like, at least know your business. But these big enterprise shippers, man, go on somewhere else.
I'll make this last point, and then we'll move to my next question. Listen, Steve, JC, I want to add something, but I forgot what I was saying. The other thing that a lot of them think they're going to accomplish is that they're going to prove that brokers are making 50% rips on every load. And so, to be honest with you, hold on. No, I don't. To be honest with you, I want us to do it so they can be so pissed off when they see that we're all making like 8 to 15% like we say we're making. And it's going to be like, told you. Not that there's not brokers that do it, because there are, but again, like, still. So
very select few, the 1%. Yes, like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. So, and honestly, the shipper controls the markets, guys. I mean, we're going to talk about that in January with the guests we have coming on, but shippers control the markets. Brokers do not set the rate. Shippers set the rate. I can tell a shipper I want $5,000 for a lane, and that doesn't mean nothing to them. Like, it's all about money. They're just like you, Mr. Carrier, and me, Mr. Broker. They're a business owner, and they are watching their bottom line, and they want as much profit as they can get. So it is always the shipper who runs it, always. Anyway, y'all want to add anything to that, gentlemen?
No.
Lightning round, man. I told you, I'm gonna make the most of this with you guys. Lightning rounds here, lightning rounds. All right, Jason, this one's directed towards you. Steve, you can also weigh in. I'm trying to word this right, Jason. All right, why do you put so much of your time, your weight, or time, and put so much weight into statistics and analytics in an industry where a lot of people say that those things and predictions of trends and markets in this industry, they don't mean nothing, because hardly ever any are ever true. But I will say this, Jason, the reason I wanted you to come on the show is because unanimously between everyone that I talk to say that your data beats every Freightway, Sonar, everyone. So Why that with you when other people say, man, there's no weight really to be had in that stuff. It really means nothing at the end of the day.
Well, and it was so funny you mentioned that. None of this data is mine. I'm usually mostly sourcing from the U.S. federal government, which makes it even more ironic, which is the one entity that really doesn't get much attention in all this. So for me, my view is what you just described sounds exactly like how baseball scouts and basketball scouts would have talked in, let's say, the 1980s and 1990s. And let's just use as a simple example. Look who basketball changed over the last 30 years. The concept of the mid-range jump shooter like Jordan or Kobe Bryant will never be seen again because every NBA team has realized it is dumb to shoot an 18-foot, 2-foot shot when I can step back behind the arc, have a 2 or 3% lower percent chance of making it, but it's worth 50% more, right? So once we got the analytics in, basketball fundamentally changed. Look at baseball. Used to be 2 strikes, choke up, do that. Somebody hitting cleanup anymore ain't doing that. They are swinging for the fences every single time. And I mean, I used to remember playing baseball as a kid, put the ball on the ground. If you're a big dude, hell no, put the ball in the air, right?
Go yard.
Why that change? It's about the analytics because folks have looked and said, in the long run, this is where it's at. And the reality is there's just very repeated patterns that we see in a sector like trucking. And so, I think part of it is there's this great mystery and misunderstanding that folks think that everything that's hauling is stuff that's being sold by Walmart or Amazon or this and that. And it's like, no, trucking is still about domestic manufacturing primarily. And that gets missed. And so for me, I'd say like my innovation, if you can even call it that, saying, hey, the Federal Reserve has been publishing industrial production data since 1919 in the United States and really detailed data since the 1970s. Like they're really, really, really good at this. This stuff tracks shockingly close to the trucking sector. It's like I'd thrown on LinkedIn today, like, hey, look at production from machine shops. I mean, the ebbs and flows of that are strikingly close to what we observe during normal times as freight expansionary cycles or freight recessions. Same way with ISM's new order data and things of that sort. And so, for me, it was just taking a lot of time to start putting all the pieces together and say, okay, maybe this series tends to track well, this series doesn't. But all this stuff's free and, our tax dollars are paying for it. But, in an industry that's $500 billion a year, just doing, 0.1% better, that's a lot of money that can be made if done correctly.
I love how Jason just makes it sound so easy. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's easy, man. I do this when I eat my breakfast every morning. You do Sudoku? I write massive, long articles about analytics. Steve, what about you, brother? What do you feel about analytics, man? You use them in a lot of the things you do in your research and stuff, So, what is your take on? Like, yeah, we're good. That's where the thing is moving, or hey, what we know today is not what we're going to know tomorrow.
Well, I get my analytics from Jason Miller. That's how. I don't use a lot of big data sets for looking at freight markets and things like that. I do like to have, and actually this is something I know Jason's just worked on that TRB report. Where I do like to have data is around driver wages and things like that. But as his committee, concluded, we don't have publicly available data that really does what we need it to do there. And I as an academic, I want more because I want access to it. And the crazy thing, and I guess if you don't mind, I'll put a question to Jason, which is, and I know we talked a little bit about this in one of the discussions with the committee, which is we know the companies have the data, like they've got the pay data, and they are operating on public roads. Why can't we require at least anonymized data about pay rates and things like that to be made available to the FMCSA? Because everybody knows when drivers are stressed economically, they're more likely to make bad decisions. I know we have to prove that with a cost benefit analysis, but the data's there. We just don't have it.
No. And I mean, the challenge is even as academics, Steve, I mean, because I've actually been thinking about tackling this. And I mean, we can get some stuff. No, we couldn't for the committee reports because you can't use the data for this. But there's a couple proprietary data sets. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has the quarterly census of employment and wages data that if you had the micro data, you could look at this. I've been looking at using the Census Bureau's longitudinal business database for this, because that actually does have establishment level pay back to 1977. So you actually could see what is the average pay per employee at a physical location that's in trucking and how that's evolved. The challenge is all of that is put under, such lock and key. I couldn't go in, remote access my way in as a researcher, generate a histogram and throw that on LinkedIn. That would be a good way for me never to get that data again. And so the challenge is, we have some of it. We can't really access it and use it though. In terms of making carriers report it, I think it would be great. But the problem is we can't connect it to what carrier it is. How can we look at things like how does this relate to safety and things like that? I mean, I've always, Mike Belzer and I are friends, but I've always teased Mike. I'm like, Mike, every paper you ever write that links pay to safety, I'm going to tell you, you could have unobservable variance in carrier productivity because your more productive carriers are having drivers get more loaded miles per week and they're getting paid more. And so that's where you get into a lot of these, complex challenges. So I would love to see better data on it. I mean, for me as a data hound, that would be phenomenal. But I think the carriers would argue tooth and nail against it. But even the other problem is, what does average pay mean for a Schneider or a JB Hunt that has multiple operating divisions, that has some mix of a little bit of lease capacity, which we're not going to see potentially showing up because that's all 1099 miscellaneous. Right. And so what does average pay mean for JB Hunt? Like, I don't know how useful that is. Or what does average pay mean for Old Dominion when I got my local, PUD drivers versus the line haul guys? Yeah.
I think that I never thought about the pay data, but like that's a good thing, especially, I don't know what all it could mean to an owner operator. Never been one, so I don't want to speculate, but as a company driver, it was everything. And I like that you talk about that average pay, Jason, because I'll tell you, that's what they all do. Average pay, average pay, average pay, I'm going to tell you what they mean by average pay. That's the average pay you're going to get if you bust your ass for this job, or you get the right thing. Because here's the fun thing: a lot of these local jobs, they're seniority based, man. So like you go to McLean and it's average $80,000 a year. Yeah, to get that $80,000 route, you've got to have 6-7 years seniority to be able to bid high enough to get that. If not, you're bouncing around working 6 days a week to make that same type of money and stuff. So, and it would be good to know how they get that. And like, what was that the average pay, 1979 or 2021? You know what I mean? Like, what year are we basing this data on here? What's the running course?
Yeah, it's one I would love to have it. I think it would be very useful. I think it would be quite noisy. So that's what everybody would have to take with is, a huge grain of salt. You'd have cost of living issues. I mean, your average driver doing local delivery in New York City is going to crush somebody from my hometown of Hicksville, Ohio, not a made up name. That's a real actual place outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And so how comparable is this? I mean, you would have to start cutting the data up so much to have something that's useful. And at that point, how great is it, or how valuable is it? Does it justify the data collection? Maybe not, because that's separate from, let's say, safety scores, which are collected because of enforcement activity that is going to go on regardless.
So Jason, I mean, you're saying that we can't know the relationship between safety and pay using statistical methods, essentially.
I mean, we could, if not going to get too wonky. I mean, if you could, let's say, find something that correlated uniquely to pay but had no effect on safety, I mean, then you can instrument for it and do all that fancy statistical stuff that they pay us to do.
Right.
But good luck with that, right? Because how could you not say? I mean, there's 155,000 carriers with at least one employee in the U.S. right now, and that's probably a low end number. Management practices across those carriers vary radically. How much of driver pay is affected by how good of a management that a carrier has, and the differences in safety, which are profound. Like, that is the one thing it cannot stress enough, is how profound carrier level safety differences are and how stable they are over time. So people say, oh, I just had a bad run of luck with, the FMC. It's like, no, you probably didn't. You've had a bad run of luck for 10 years. Whereas this other carrier's had this amazing run of luck over the same period. And so,
as a policy matter then, I mean, so should we just be having these outcome based, approaches and say, look, we're going to do our inspections. We're going to look at your accident rates and, you either improve them. We don't care how, is that what we should be doing for our approach?
I mean, to me, that's more of the focus, just simply because we only have so much resources we can devote to a sector that is almost unimaginably vast and has something like 20-some thousand new entry firms each and every year, give or take, somewhere between, I think, 10 and 15 to 10 and 20,000 firms with at least one employee. I'm not talking about somebody becoming a non-employer firm where they become an independent owner-operator, for-hire owner-operator, and are doing their own thing, and they're not an employee. They got an LLC. We don't even get them in the standard government statistics. So, the reality is, unless we incredibly beef up the amount of resources the FMCSA gets, it's hard to tell. That the study I want to see done is, I want to see how much variation in carrier safety scores comes about because of the inspectors involved. Because I'm 100% convinced that you've got some really easy inspectors, and then you've got some Grinches out there, and nobody's been able to tell me yet, okay, how much could let's say your basic score vary based on if you've got 20 inspections from the easiest guy or gal out there versus 20 inspections from the worst? How much could your score pop around? And things of that sort. That to me is like the immediate need that we have, especially as more and more and more shippers, I think, are going to start strategically thinking about, okay, we want to insulate ourselves from, serious liability issues. We're going to start using CSA data to be more stringent on, okay, you're above this level, you're cut now. Because we're starting to see that even with a lot of the flack Amazon's gotten from their middle mile procurement strategies. CBS just publishing a piece showing, hey, unsafe driving scores for the average carrier doing Amazon middle mile is not the best type of thing.
We're gonna.
Hey, before we dive into that, I do want to touch on what we've just been talking about. So, where's the divide there? Because we're talking about a JB Hunt to where, I'm not looking up JB Hunt on Carrier 411. They have so many different entities. They're international, intermodal, over the road, LTL. Nobody's checking those safety scores, and obviously, that percentile of out of service is going to be a lot. They could have 100 trucks that do not pass inspection, but it's just a blip on the scale in the grand scheme of things compared to a mid-sized carrier that has 50 to 500 trucks maybe, and that's a big deal. People care about that, but with this data, would you want to do a split to where it is like the JB Hunts, the I guess what are they, T-Force now with UPS, these mega carriers compared to people like PCT that have 200 trucks?
So what I'd tell you is a little story about the FMCSA for why they do the safety event groupings the way they do, and the logic for that is not what the industry thinks. The reason that they do, let's say you take HOS, right? If you're 501 plus inspections over the last 2 years, you're in group 5, and that is by far on average the safest, most compliant carriers as it pertains to hours of service. The reason the feds do that is it puts everybody on the varsity squad, and so everyone has to continually get better. Otherwise, you're going to get worse. So where you get weird things, if you think about being a shipper, and there is a correlation between hours of service scores and crash rates. It's not as pronounced as unsafe driving scores and crash rates, but it is still there, and it is certainly statistically significant. I could have a carrier that's, let's say, 75th percentile in that 501 plus inspections that has a lower actual violation rate than another carrier that's at the 50th percentile in that one size category below, because that's not the varsity team. That's kind of the JV team. And then by the time we get down to, the 3 to 8 inspections, we're a lot more violation is more likely to happen. And so to me, it's about absolute violation levels, because that is what correlates with accident rates. It's not the percentiles, because those percentiles distort the effective size. And if anything, it makes it more challenging for the mega carrier, where a 0.5 HOS, basic may put you above that 65th percentile threshold, whereas 0.5 doesn't do anything in the 3 to 8 inspection bin.
Okay. So it's like MLB, AAA, down to farm.
Yeah, that'd be a good analogy. We're at single A by the time we're 3 to 8.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that.
So before we move on to the next one, I promised Richie I would get to this. Richie, we've said this forever. Why? I would like to know why Steve does not have a Twitter account.
Well, listen, I dipped my toe in. I don't have any social media. I have a LinkedIn account, but social media, anything like that, I dipped my toe in like 2 weeks ago because my kid's school had an Instagram account and they put some videos up. And so in order to see them, I had to go to Instagram. Well, within 3 days at 3 a.m, I'm watching car crashes one after the other. I woke up the next day, I just deleted the thing. I was like, look, I'm not cut out for this. Okay. I can't be that wired. I don't have that kind of discipline. I don't know. Maybe it's
that's good.
Maybe my mom didn't hold me enough or something.
And Richie also said, tell Steve that the truckers don't understand how they are being misclassified as independent contractors. Not sure exactly what he means by that, but that's Richie. I promise you I'll bring it up.
Well, obviously
he's going to get into that union talk. Be careful there, Pedro.
Yeah. Big topic of conversation there.
Yeah, last thing we want to do is get Richie started on his whole union thing. Richie, we know you're pro-union. He loves it. He loves trying to educate people. But nobody ever wants to listen to Richie. No.
We at some point maybe we'll do something on AB5 and classification and the sort of bigger issues.
I got a doctoral student actually doing one of his dissertation papers on that. So
dude, I would love that. I would like that. That would be a good one right there. With Steve, we gotta get Steve and Jason's student doing his doctorate. That would be a good one.
Yeah. That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask down the road. If you have students doing like some of this this data work for you guys, I think that'd be really interesting. Have students stir the pot.
Yeah, that was actually a fun one, because what we did is we actually created a synthetic California using a statistical technique that the guy who invented it's for sure going to win the Nobel Prize in a few years. But literally what you do is you take other states as a donor pool and you assemble essentially what this combination that looks exactly like California before AB5. And then you compare how that pool behaves after this intervention, because they shouldn't be affected, versus California that is. And so you saw some crazy behavior. Like, for example, the big carriers, they stopped using leased owner operators. Like the biggest boys and girls in the world, certainly above 1,000 power units, those carriers that are in California, they don't exist anymore using leased owner operators. They all switch to employees. Whereas the small firms, there's still a lot of leased capacity in their motor carrier census files. And so you can see the classic behavior in trucking. The big firms who have a lot more to lose and a lot more regulatory exposure, they respond much more quickly versus, the smaller firms that tend to fly a little bit under the radar. they didn't behave, but we're actually able to put some numbers on that.
That's awesome. That I can't wait to see that. So that's what I was seeing, and it's funny because I went down to the port of LA and Long Beach. We did a survey of drivers for this agricultural study that I did for the state, and we made contact with 500 drivers. And I'll tell you what, I mean, they're, virtually all lease operators. Well, I shouldn't say that, 90+%. They were barely even aware that AB5 had gone into effect. They were not responding to it at all. Like, they were just like, well, at some point somebody's going to come and tell me to do something. I heard about this law, but like, are they going to mail me something that I fill out and give up my truck? It's just like business as usual, going on there. Whereas, as you said, a lot of the big carriers just immediately, to avoid the liability, just ended their program.
All right, Jason, staying on little data points here, and then we're gonna move on, because we promised our people we would not be boring them with analytics. No, we're just joking. But I love your stuff, man. You were really on point with a lot of things and really gotten into reading your posts and stuff. Thank you, Jeff Dickinson, Bill Robinson, for turning me on to Jason. Here's a question, man. You've been posting some stuff lately about like certain markets, industries, I should say. What are you thinking or seeing in 2025 is one of the first markets to bounce back that would help the trucking industry? Like retail, construction, just general consumer goods. What are you seeing? Is anything showing that we're headed for something good? People have some things to look forward to?
Yeah, so a big one that I'm watching most closely is residential construction. So a lot of freight cycles are tied very strongly to residential construction activity. If you look at 04, 05, parts of 06, very good period for trucking. There's also the midst of our housing boom. If you look at actually the other side of the COVID pandemic, it doesn't get talked about enough, but we saw a 20% uptick in real housing construction activity, whether it be single family starts, multifamily starts, improvements, et cetera. And then that turned down really rapidly in the third quarter of 2022, right when we essentially started to enter this freight recession. So that's probably the one I'm looking at the most closely. Previously, fracking had been a sector that had really pulled trucking, along with it. I don't see that taking place, that seeing much of an uptick, because there's a brutal reality that the economics of fracking today are not what they were a decade ago when we had peak fracking in 2014. We will never have fracking activity like we did in 2014. The economics just don't support it. And we don't need to wonk out on exactly why, but just take my word for it. Unless oil goes up to $120 a barrel, which none of us want. Maybe my investment in BP does. But apart from some people's stock portfolios here hoping for that, nobody wants that. So that's the only thing that's really would spur a lot more fracking activity. So I'm looking at housing construction. The auto sector has seen a slowdown. In November's auto sales motor vehicle sales were phenomenal. So maybe if interest rates come down a little bit more, financing's a little bit less, people buy a little bit more. But right now the dealers have too much inventory on the lot. So right now is a good time to buy if you're looking at for a new car or truck. But looking at that sector, and then I really watch closely sort of machinery. And the reason for that is just capital investment does drive a lot of trucking demand, because it cascades over to fabricated metal products, and then steel and things like that. So watch, and, kind of related to the construction, watching for production of bricks and things of that sort, and lumber from sawmills, just to see where we're at on that front. Because, that sector really, overall construction really took a deep dive from kind of the highs it was at in 21 and early 22 to where we're at today.
I like it. You're not, I've heard other people say the same thing. They tie a lot of like trucking industry stuff to the construction, like when homes are starting to be built, obviously that's a sign people are spending money, and there's very few things in life you can spend more money on at one time than a house. So, people are coming off that kind of money, obviously, then, they're spending money on other things, consumer goods go up. So, and
the one thing too is a lot of people have a misunderstanding. They'll say, well, housing that only affects flatbed. It's like, no, everything that goes into that house typically moves in a dry van trailer, whether it's the large appliances that goes in, whether it's the carpets and all that type of fun stuff. So housing is kind of the one thing that lifts all boats. I'm hoping we see some deregulation with the incoming Trump administration, because we need to build more houses in this country. Like, there is just no way around that. And quite frankly, that is my big inflationary concern, is we've got to start building more houses, because housing is unaffordable for too many people.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. I was just talking to someone today about housing prices. They were telling me a friend of theirs just bought a house that they looked at, my friend looked at like 6 years ago, and their mortgage is going to be like $1,300 or something like that. And his friend just bought the same exact house, because it's back on the market now, and their mortgage is almost $3,000.
I was in mentally when you were doing that.
No
I was like,
way.
I bet you he's going to be like 3,500 because once you factor in the insurance. But that's what happens when you've had houses become 50% more expensive since COVID, but you have interest rates up where they're at. And so that's the one thing I think everybody in trucking, you really need to be watching closely. What is the 30-year mortgage rate at? Because the one thing for everybody to keep in mind, that is not necessarily tied to the federal funds interest rates that we talk about so much. That's tied to the yield on the 10-year treasury, and that's determined by a marketing process. That's not determined mechanically by the Fed setting things. So while bank prime will go down as interest rates come down, mortgage rates need not necessarily come down that much.
Yeah, I would like them to get back to where they at when I got my house. I got a 3% on mine.
Oh,
So
that's never going to happen. I hate to tell you, those days are gone. If we're sub 5 on mortgages by the end of next year, I would be stunned.
Yeah, well, we still need it though. My point is, I agree with you. Like, the lower we get that, so the more we can expect out of the freight market. So I'm with it, and it seems so much is based on those mortgage rates. Like, I learned that as an adult, man. Like, you hear that stuff we talk about, you're like, who cares? I'll never own a house, dude. That's so much more to do with just buying a house, man. You really don't even understand. Steve, I want to get back to you, man. I want to talk about something that I know is near and dear to your heart. Well, I don't know. Maybe it may not be. AVs, Steve. What's your take on AVs?
Yeah, well, we're seeing, I think now a lot of your viewers and a lot of drivers now are like, oh, see, they've run their course. We've seen this, the weeding out of all these companies. I mean, most of the Silicon Valley programs you've heard about over the last 6-7 years are now gone. And so it didn't work. And, I'm still a believer that this stuff is inevitable. It's not going to look the way that, people might have thought, 10 years ago. But we're going to have self-driving trucks. They're going to be limited in their use for a long time. But there's, there's lots of uses for them that will drive the market, such as just military uses, which again is the place I always try to get people to start thinking about it is, this is military technology. It was, all the way back to 2000 or 2001 when Congress, first created the DARPA challenges. And the goal was to have a third of all, combat vehicles in the U.S. forces be unmanned. And that's not going to stop. The technology is going to continue to evolve, and the use of it for long haul routes is just a no brainer. Now it's got lots of challenges, but they're coming. They're going to be there. I don't know if it'll be 5 years before we see lanes that are actually have a significant number on them, or 10 years or 15 years, but they're gonna come.
So are you thinking, Steve, that we're looking at the eventual death, maybe in the next generation or two, of the traditional truck driver?
I think, the job is already, this is the other thing that I try to highlight and have conversations about with folks is we've already seen such incredible technological change in the industry. People they say, well, what about automation in trucking? I mean, when I started my research in 2005, automation was already affecting the industry. Just dispatching, monitoring of the trucks, satellite linked computers, the effect that they had on the job and the labor market. And then I know it's not sexy, but the big kind of automation so far has been shifting. You put automatic transmissions into trucks, and suddenly you've opened up a whole new labor supply, right? And you've sped up the training, et cetera. So we've already seen so much technological change that I think the older drivers out there would already say we've seen the death of the old school truck driver. And in some ways, of course, they're right. But jobs change. We invest capital in machines and technology to reduce labor costs. That's kind of how capitalism works, and it's gonna continue to work that way. I think along some routes certainly, but now let me put my big caveat on there. I think this stuff is policy contingent. So, for instance, I have for your viewers who are interested, I have a report called Driverless Report. It's at driverlessreport.org. And I put it out in 2018. I think it still holds up very well for the different scenarios of what's possible. But let's say you got a self-driving truck. It can go 1,500 miles, 2,000 miles, whatever it is. You've got to do a local pickup and delivery. You got to get on the highway. Maybe you've got weather problems. Maybe you've got a blown tire, whatever it is. You'd love to have a person there, right? Now, if that person can be logged as off duty for hours of service, right? Is not entitled to minimum wage for the time that they're sleeping, et cetera. Why would you ever pull that person out of the truck, right? So we could just have very cheap machine tenders that do the local driving or just intervene when the truck is there, right? Why would you pull the driver out if you're not paying them a lot, right? And if you have an increasingly de-skilled truck driver, as we've had over time, right? So whether or not, so hours of service regulations, minimum wage, classification, if that driver can own that truck, be an independent contractor, right? Live out of the truck, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the trucks may be self-driving, but still have a human in them, right? Now, if we had, policy that said you've got to pay them for every hour they're on the truck, et cetera, you're going to want to get that person out of the truck, right? And you're going to want to have that separation of maybe a human driven truck in the local area and then a long haul truck. So all, and there are other, policy areas, I think that will influence this too. But we're going to see increased automation, increased, just look at forward collision avoidance, things like that. The savings to carriers from not running over minivans is just, oh my God. I mean, these accidents now are, tens of millions of dollars potentially, for a fatal accident. And so the investment in this technology is just going to go. I mean, people say like, oh, labor costs, it's a third of the cost. Then you put the accidents in there, I mean, and the value of this technology is tremendous.
Jason, I want to get your standpoint for Hunter and I chime in here.
Yeah, so what I would say is I think there will be. So I'm a little bit less, I'm not sure how to say this, pessimistic on the ultimate use just because of how fragmented the freight market is. I see the automated vehicle having clear application for the power lane type of business where you can put together a nice continuous tour of run Chicago to Atlanta and Atlanta up to Columbus and Columbus over. There it makes sense where you've got enough volume. I see these vehicles being the domain of the mega carriers because it's a much higher fixed cost. The maintenance piece of it alone is going to be huge. And so it's going to take a long time till you can have the amount of truck shops that can maintain this type of equipment. It's kind of the same problem with your Tesla. Good luck if that thing breaks down versus my Ford type of situation. So I think there will be applications. The key thing that Steve mentioned, it really depends on the policy piece, is what do we sort of put in place from a liability standpoint? So self-driving truck is going to get into accidents. Like this will happen. Who's responsible type of situation. how much regulatory or how much lobbying does OIDA do and get every independent, for hire owner operator calling their congressperson saying, don't let these things on the road. So that's going to be a huge.
And I'm on a show. I'm trying to finish this up.
Don't care. Let's go.
And so I think that there will be application. I do think it's going to take a long time. I think, Steve, your report holds up great. That's what I still teach in class. So.
If you just give me a minute, I'm trying to wind down. Wind down. Just give me a second.
There we go. Yeah. So my point on it, so I could like what you guys were talking about, like maybe like a Chicago to Atlanta type deal. Do you see like maybe an infrastructure change to where like they build, just like a separate lane for these trucks, so they're outside of normal traffic? Because I mean, it'll take the liability away from a driver or that company, but if an autonomous truck gets in a wreck, somebody's still going to be held liable, and that's going to cause some major ruckus.
I could see that being a push. I mean, it'll depend if, how much money folks want to spend on that. I think the other challenge too is how are these things going to be propelled? Because from a standpoint, the routes we just mentioned, they're still at the threshold of, certainly Atlanta to Columbus. That's probably still favors truck over intermodal. But like LA to Chicago, there ain't anything going to be more efficient than BNSF loading up, 120 53-foot trailers on a mega train and just sending that on. And so I think that the ultra long haul power lanes, those are still going to be the domain for intermodal. Because if the railroads are functioning smoothly, like right now, this year, 2024, at least the second half is probably going to be record intermodal container movements, because we got a lot of stuff coming in through LA Long Beach. And guess what? That unless something's jammed up, that is going on a train and it is heading to the hinterland.
See, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, Jason, I was going to say the thing that people have not. We talk a lot about the drivers, and I obviously that's a huge concern about what the work's going to look like. But when people talk about self-driving trucks, we have not even scratched the surface on the modal shift question. If we get really good cost savings, and you start putting a lot more trucks coming out of maybe not the ultra long haul, but stuff coming out of the ports and things like that are going maybe to Phoenix or even as far as Texas, you start to get some discounts on that stuff, plus an additional couple days maybe of time saved. LA doesn't want 100,000 more loads going out of the ports every month or whatever on a truck. So I don't, again, and those are the policy questions now. And of course, electrification and autonomy run in opposite directions, right? Electrification is all about local, and autonomy, you're going to make your money with miles, and you're not, those longer loads are going to be hard to electrify. So I think that all of those are big policy questions.
See, the only thing that I wouldn't say the only thing, but my big thing with the AVs is just like the EVs is that, we're jumping into things here. Like the funds were there from the government and the ideas there, the technology's kind of there in a sense, and everyone just kind of jumping head first. Like it's like we're working our way back from the end zone to the start of the play. We're doing things reverse, because Jason brought some good points. Like just like the EVs. Oh man, it's all great, but what about all the industries that have to additionally support this? So you talk about mechanics, part suppliers, all of these things. Same thing with this automation technology. If this stuff goes down in the middle of the Sierra Nevadas on I-80, how long is it going to take for you to get someone out there? And then, and you go with the driver in the truck. Personally, I would like to see it this way. That even when this automation comes, there's always a driver in that seat. And I, in my mind, I envision it just like we have, I don't know, every car calls it something different that does it. But, Tesla has its, auto drive, and Chevy has its little auto drive, but you're still there having to be behind the wheel and pay attention in case something happens. There is someone there, because to me, and everyone, people tell me I'm wrong, but I'm sorry. I just don't think technology will ever be to the point that it can replace human sentience and intuition. I just don't. Like, I'm sorry, you cannot write enough algorithms for a machine to be able to think and see the world the way a human does, because we're just talking about sensors, you know what I mean? And with us, we use sensors too, but ours work different, and they all work in correlation together for us to move and maneuver through this world around us. I just don't see, automation technology as far as trucks getting to that level. I just don't see the sustainability over it, right now. Maybe 2, 3, 4 generations, yes. But again, my problem is that we're just jumping head first without thinking about the problems we're going to need to solve. Once we figure out technology, well, great. We figured out the AV, but again, where's all the mechanics? Where's the part suppliers? Where's this the person and that person? And then Steve, you talked about an owner operator. What are we talking tax stuff or whatever with an owner operator? Like, if you're an owner operator and you're in that truck and you're technically not driving, do you have to have that CDL? Are you an employee? Is the truck the employee? Do you have to pay income taxes on the, you know what I'm saying? Like, it sounds stupid, but there's all of these little things that go along with it, man. I don't think that we've fully thought through yet. Again, same thing with the EV stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did Chef say? Just remember, bronze is superior for iron for centuries. Yeah. Exactly. No, well, yeah, we need to go to Manifest. I don't know if we'd fit into Manifest, Chris. I don't know.
Buy my tickets, Indy.
Yeah, buy our tickets, Indy. There we go. We'll all go to Manifest. Indy's buying all our tickets to Manifest. $3,000 a pop.
We'll hop in the freight shaker, man. We'll make a trip from Kentucky.
Yeah. All right. So, want to end all of this on what I think is going to be a big part, one of the best parts of this, and that is getting on the Amazon stuff. It has been brought up so many times, and coincidentally, this person right here, Freight Guardian, is a friend of us. He was a part of the design of Amazon Relay. So we had him on the show not too long ago, and he actually talked about a lot of the things that went behind the scenes, that people don't understand, don't know it on, the lack of regulation within the company and, oversight from outside sources, all of these things. So I want to give each one of you, what are your deals with Amazon here? Because you both got something different, but slightly the same. So whoever wants to go first.
Steve,
Jason, take it away.
Okay. So what I would say is I've got to give my buddy Alex Scott some credit for this, because he's doing some research on how Amazon's freight network changed since they created the Relay app, and using, let's say, Walmart as a counterfactual to that. And once Relay gets created, the average number of carriers Amazon works with skyrockets. Those carriers are much smaller and much younger than what they were prior to that. And as CBS has put out, those carriers tend to be far less safe than the carriers that are moving freight for Walmart, as an example. That is just the reality of it. There's no way you can get around that. So my general view, and you read Chris Weaver's reporting in the Wall Street Journal, and especially how, as he was doing his investigative reporting, he would point out carriers to Amazon. Amazon would then go deactivate those carriers in the system. There's just this almost scary process of Chris, working for Wall Street Journal, would identify firms that were problematic, inform Amazon, and then they would essentially terminate them from hauling Amazon's freight. So what I would say is I think that Amazon's incredible growth over the last decade has probably led to looser than potentially ideal criteria for letting carriers in the network. And, you could see it in their response to CBS News when they said, well, we are more stringent than the FMCSA. It's like, yeah, because the FMCSA is having to police a couple million operating authorities right now. And we don't have anything automated that actually deactivates carriers. So that is really not setting much of a standard, to be clear.
That's a great example. Man, that is a great example. Steve.
Well, so I've been focused on the smaller vehicles. So I've been focused on the delivery itself for the last 3 or 4 years, doing a comparison essentially of UPS, Amazon, and the U.S. Postal Service. And the big story there is, it's fascinating. So your viewers probably know about the DSPs, right? The delivery delivery service partners that Amazon uses that essentially mimic what a manager and a bunch of drivers would look like in a UPS, unit, maybe like, maybe a tenth of a terminal or something like that. They're essentially trying to find a middle ground between the Amazon Flex, which is Uber for packages essentially, and UPS delivery. The problem is, quality and turnover, right? A question of quality and turnover. So they're using a lot of technology that allows them to de-skill the job. So the routes are automated. You basically take all that situated, that knowledge that the driver has, put it into the app. So there's huge cost savings there. The problem is that no one's sticking around in these jobs, and they're burning through labor like crazy. So, the big question is that sustainable? Are they going to start having trouble hiring and need to raise wages? And two, are they going to get organized by the Teamsters? The Teamsters are essentially, this is their plan for the future, is to organize Amazon. And they have signaled that they, are considering putting major resources behind it. Now, whether or not they actually do, I think is the big question. If you look at Amazon from an organizational standpoint, you couldn't design a company that is more susceptible to unionization than Amazon is. Like, it's time sensitive, customer facing, highly interdependent units. It's basically the Teamsters organizing model. This is like what they dream about is Amazon. Now, of course, the DSP, with its franchise-like model and the fact that those drivers aren't employees, they're employees of the subcontractor, is designed to minimize that risk. And, again, politics, etc. I don't think it's an accident that Jeff Bezos is, making friendly with Trump. So, because it'll probably probably go up to that level eventually.
Yeah, Bezos is definitely playing 4D chess.
Yeah, that's true. Amazon is definitely shaking things up. And talk about their workforce. You're talking about the unionization, and the Jason, you had said as well, the kind of things going to the wayside, is you hear it everywhere. I mean, and on social media, there is actually, I don't know if it's Teamsters, maybe it may not be, but there's been some stuff going around on TikTok explicitly of these Amazon warehouse workers unionizing at a couple locations. And so it's already starting, but I mean, I've heard the stories. They treat people, work them to like dogs, man. I mean, like pre labor's Fair Labor Standards Act stuff. You know what I mean? Like
the warehouse workers, you can't talk to people, you can't go to the bathroom, you can't listen to music, like that, they will fire you on the spot.
And even some of these drivers, like the vape shop I go to, one of the guys works here, he works like 4 days as an Amazon driver, and just I was talking to him, I was like, dude, how many stops do you have a day? And he was telling me, and I was asked about a schedule and stuff, and I was like, dude, holy shit, bro, it's crazy, man. It's like 100 something stops, and then you load it and you unload it, and then he got the stuff when he gets back to the warehouse he's got to do, and it was like, I was like, holy crap, man. And he works like 14 hours a day, and he gets paid by the hour, and he's like, dude, I make good money. He's like, but holy crap, man. He's like, you just, and he told me, like, down here where we're at is Austin's where he's out of. And I guess the DSPs down there pay pretty decent, Steve. So, he's like, dude, he's like, there's people waiting to get these jobs because it's guaranteed overtime at like $18 an hour base pay.
But at the same time, man, I've seen videos where people show up to work and everybody does not a single person has a job. They show up that morning. Yeah, we don't need you anymore.
Very true. So I mean, but his thing was like, you're not really valued. He's like the contractor doesn't value you because they've got other people standing at the door waiting, and all you need is a little Class C license, and they'd love to make $18 an hour plus overtime. And he's like, Amazon, they don't give a shit about it because you're not one of their employees. He's like, they don't care, and so it's bad. They've done a lot of good, but I think you kind of look at it. I'll come back to this example. It was like the Industrial Revolution part of America. A lot of great things happened, but there was a lot of bad stuff. that happened behind the scenes, man, that people didn't see
Still
that caused a lot of the rules regulations that we have today. And more specifically, my concern is Amazon with logistics. You know what I mean? Like they have set and done so many great things, but they've also set some unrealistic bars for other operations and stuff as far as delivery times and data and technology. But also, I think they're really doing a lot of damage to the new entrants into this industry. They abuse them so bad. And Jason, like you touched on it. I mean, like I run a Facebook group, and so many people come in there who want to work with people who have who have authorities that can run Amazon freight, because they can't get hired to do anything by any other broker because they only have 3 to 6 months. And they go and they run in there and they run that freight at $1 something a mile, and Amazon does nothing about it because their stuff's still getting delivered and they don't care. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just jump in on two points there? So one, and this gets to the new entrants, those wages you were mentioning. So UPS, I know, is very concerned about this. Postal Service is as well. Postal Service has a new contract, that's going out for a vote. UPS obviously had the big one last year. Their concerns as organizations are, hey, yeah, our wages are comparable to what Amazon's offering. Sometimes Amazon comes in a little bit higher than the Postal Service, but we've got healthcare, retirement benefits, all this stuff. And so traditionally on the delivery side, package delivery, they've been good jobs with more than just a good wage. You got health insurance, these things called a pension. Nobody remembers what those are, but that still exists at UPS. So, they are changing the norm there, right? Because it is, those delivery jobs are good jobs. So that's having an impact. But on those working conditions, I'll just to bring it home for folks what it means. I'm interviewing a UPS driver, a postal, your letter carrier, and a DSP driver. That DSP driver will say things like, okay, I've got this color code on my phone that says, I'm behind, so now the color's red. I got to speed up my delivery, and they say, well, how do I do this to their boss? And the boss says, well, have you tried jogging, like literally physically jogging from the, truck to the door. Now, to someone who's never done delivery work, that may seem like a reasonable thing to do, but you cannot make a career out of delivering with hundreds of stops jogging to the door. Like, you're going to last 2 months, 6 months before you end up with a serious injury. If you're lucky, you'll last a year. So, it's those kinds of norms that are being disrupted, where there's no labor voice. There's no way you're going to walk into a UPS terminal and say, hey guys, today we got a little extra volume. We got to speed up the process. Why don't you put your spikes on and jog from the truck to the door today? Like, that's not happening, but it can happen at Amazon, and it's eroding. The more experienced drivers say that those norms of high quality jobs that have typically been found there in delivery.
Yeah, I've heard all of that. Everything you said, I've heard, and it could just be a difficult place to work. Anything, even not just for the company directly, even dealing with the contractors and stuff like that. But I don't know, they're just a company. They're so big that the things that they do or don't do, they reverberate throughout many industries and parts of society and the economy and everything. I mean, so it's nuts. And I think a lot of other companies take cues from them because of their success and their size. And it's like, that's great. But, sometimes not every cue is the cue you want to be taking. You know what I mean? So, and but I really think that their big problem that they have, I think directly with us, a lot of the part is the way that their system is set up, again, to kind of be predatory with some of these carriers, and even like we talked about this with our buddy Josh, is that there's kind of like this unspoken pay to play, but technically their carriers aren't paying. But what I mean by that is you get on with Amazon Relay and you get the crap, at the beginning of stuff, and you got to work your way up and deem yourself worthy in the eyes of the system or the people there to really start getting a good freight and the good loads and things that pay better and are more sustainable for you and your company as a carrier. So, you know, it's they got a lot of things going wrong there, man.
Yeah.
But a lot of things going right too. So kind of what do? You know what I mean? Like, you know, it really is a difficult thing.
I got packages showing up every day.
I bet you do, man. I bet you do. Everybody does right now. Everybody doesn't. Man, you were talking about that UPS stuff. I used to, before we chop off here, one of my jobs that I disliked the most is I worked for a company that had contracts with Amazon. It was funny that we had contracts with Amazon, UPS, and DHL, and we got all their final mile packages and had to take them to the post office. Dude, we'd get those trucks like late in the afternoon, and you had to stay until that entire semi truck was sorted. And then, oh man, and then the post offices, they treated us like dirt, man, like scum on their shoes. I'm serious, bro. They're like, we don't want you in here because we're bringing them work, I guess. I don't know, but I hated that job. There were so many data points and stuff that you had to keep track of, and so many systems that you had to input data into every single day, and you had meetings like 3 times a week, one with each person, and it was the most ridiculous thing. But the company, I think it was like a $6 million contract, so the boss loved it, but I hated it, having to deal with it. It was so horrible. Some of the things they asked for were just unrealistic. Like you were talking about the running thing, you know, times were a huge deal with them, and like they marked everything, so you had to scan it. Like as soon as you went to the post office, there were literally stickers on the door. You scanned it and it showed you checked into that, and they would time you from there. The next one, they're like, oh, well, you know, your guy did it in 3 minutes this week and 2 minutes this, you know, and or 5 minutes this week. And it's like, yeah, because he had like 4 times the amount of packages. And they're, you know, well, how can he unload those 4 times the amount of packages at the same time? I don't know. Give him help. Like, what do you want me to tell you? So it was absolutely ridiculous, is my point. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Hunter. You have anything
Yes,
to ask the gym before we start closing stuff out? Because my kid's trying to build this bed, man, and he is absolutely losing it in there, dude. That's what. So he's
Tell
doing.
him
Like,
to build himself, man. He's a grown man.
he's trying. He needs my help, man. I guess. I don't know.
Um,
Dad to the rescue, as always, right?
I would say, what's the one thing that you preach to your students the most before they step out your door for the last time?
For me, it's, you know, forget about right or wrong answers. There's stuff that's justified, makes sense versus doesn't make sense. So get rid of the idea of a 0 and 1 binary, right or wrong. Because if that's how you approach your jobs, you're going to drive yourself crazy. So do the best you can, have it make sense, and be able to explain it to yourself why you did it.
I love that.
Man, that is a tough one, because I probably give more advice than I should. You know, I try to get my students to really think about their careers, you know, holistically relative to their lives. You know, Penn is a business school, and so I think it's something over half of our students go into consulting and finance, and that's outside of Wharton, the actual business school. So, and they work themselves to death. And you know, that's great, but we have students who haven't taken time to really think about their lives much. They just, you know, I love them, and you know, I'll say it, you know, they've jumped through a lot of hoops because somebody told them to jump through hoops, and they're freaking awesome at it. You know, super talented, bright, great kids. So I tell them, you know, make this stuff work for you. Don't forget why you're doing this. You know, like, you're going to go and make a lot of money, and that's great. And you're going to tell me you're going to retire at 35, you know, and buy your sailboat. Well, you better buy your goddamn sailboat. I haven't been teaching long enough for many of them to reach 35. The first crop is getting there. But you know, if it makes sure your job's working for you too.
I like that. I think that is sound advice in any like. I like that, Steve. Make sure your job is working for you. That's a good one, man. You're right there. Even me, I'm 40, man, and like, you know, I was brought up the traditional way. You know, you go, even though I didn't follow the route, I did. It just took me longer. But you know, you go to school, high school, you go to college, you get a a job with as you said, a pension, you know what I mean, and your little stock options and stuff. And it's not for everybody. It wasn't for me. I tried it. I got through high school and tried to go to school for a business degree because that's what my dad said was the smartest thing to do, and I hated it. The only class I liked was my business class, and it's because my business professor was the funniest freaking old man, dude. He was like 85, should not have been teaching. Like, I think this dude taught business to Moses. I swear to God. But he was Dr. Frick was his fucking name too. I swear, Frick. Dude, you have no idea how many people called him Dr. Fuck, like all the time, out of a genuine mistake. They thought that was his name because of the way it looked on the classroom. The text the college chose, it looked like a U. It was so freaking great. It was so great. But Dr. Frick, he was awesome. So yeah, that's great advice. A lot of people, they try to follow that rat race what other people want to do, and they forget that they're doing it for them. You know what I mean? Like, this is for you to learn something and be something to take this where you want to take it. So that's good. Jason, you can learn a lot from Steve, man.
Yeah.
Don't start the feud.
I know.
Round two.
I was telling Hunter, I was like, I'm gonna try to get these two going before the end of the show, and it hasn't worked yet, man. It hasn't worked yet. All right, you two. Before we let y'all go, Steve, since you got to start first at the beginning, Jason, we'll start first with you this time. Any exiting comments, questions, concerns? You want to give yourself some plugs, Jason?
Not really. No, it's just been fun to be on.
Awesome. That's the best right there. We just in the show right there. Boom. Steve, have a good day. No.
Yeah, guys, it's been great. I'm excited to see what the new Secretary of Transportation has interest in, and if we're going to see some what the new administration's policy is going to look like on the federal level, and we'll see.
We'll see. I'm not very optimistic. I'm a little disappointed, but I'm gonna get into it. I'm a little disappointed about some of the people we're picking for some of these things here, man. I really am. I thought we were going to be a little smarter about some of these decisions, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Get buffs out.
We'll see what happens, man. That's all I'm gonna say. Incredible, Jason. We're gonna get you back too again for another round too, so we could dig some more into you and get to know you a little bit better. Steve, we're always gonna have you back. You always got the cool stuff. Well, you are
lounge lizards.
Yeah, man, and you're such a wealth of knowledge. I still have 3 questions left I wanted to ask you, Jason. I still got like 3 or 4 I want to ask you, so I'm gonna save them for next time. And think that's all we're gonna do. Hunter, anything for the final sponsor break, and then we kind of
Jason, great to finally meet you. Steve, glad to have you back on again. You guys rock. Like, I wish I could have had you all as professors in school, because I probably would have paid attention more and been a little bit smarter. But yeah, keep on rocking and rolling. Love this conversation today, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Happy holidays.
Yeah. Jason, you can hang with us for a minute if you want, or you can chop out. It's up to you. We're going to get off here in a minute. We usually hang out backstage for a second, so it's up to you. What else is rock and roll? Long live the lizards. That's right, Indy. Yes.
Term of endearment.
Yeah, and Steve, I don't know if you saw it, but Indy said that he got your book from Amazon. So Steve, you're part of the problem.
Yeah, you can send our royalty check to Lounge Media Group LLC.
Fantastic.
What else absolutely rocks is when you don't have to worry about where you're going to park your truck. That's why you got to do business with people like Freight Ninja. They're doing truck parking differently. Dude, you know what we got to do? We got to get those two back on, like on a freestyle type day. It just bring them.
Did you kick Jason out?
Oh no, I thought he said he was leaving, so I pulled him down. I thought he just.
No, I was gonna say it was great having you guys. I'll see you.
Hey, have a good one, Jason.
Hey, brother.
Later, buddy. But anyway, get them back on and like just bring on some people from the audience. You know, people like Indy that come on and just shoot the shit with them and stuff, man. Like those guys have just got a plethora of knowledge that we did not get to dig into.
I agree.
I know. You see, reading your text message.
No, I'm not, dude. I'm
They're working.
I'm working.
I know you are. I know you are. It's only what? It's only not even 4 o'clock over at the headquarters yet, there, buddy.
I know.
You got
California
anything you want to say,
time.
man?
California
Anything you-
dreaming, man.
Yeah. You got anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, that was an awesome show, dude. Those guys are wicked smart, and I hope we can get them back sooner than later. But yeah, riveting conversations here on the lounge.
Yeah, I liked it, dude. It was enjoyable, man. I'm gonna say we're gonna get Jason back again. Like we've had Steve twice, so I'm gonna get Jason back solo, man, and like talk to him a little more and stuff. It'll be a good time. All right, everybody, we're gonna get out of here. I'm gonna go help this kid build this freaking bed that this bed here, and just enjoy the rest of the meeting. We hope you all do the same. Please tune in for the show on Friday, Freestyle Friday. We're gonna go back to it. Haven't had one in a little bit, couple weeks, month, I don't know, something like that. So come and join us for Freestyle Friday. If you want to be a part of the show, just let us know, and we'll shoot you a link. Yo. I don't know. I just had to try to make that last bit rhyme. That's all. I'm just trying to keep going. All right, everyone, have a good one. As I always say, chunk the deuces, Mr. Hound, roll that beautiful bean footage.
Where is it? Boom.
The views and opinions expressed on this show by its guests are not necessarily those of Lounge Media Group or the show host. So if you sue someone, make sure it's the party responsible for hurting your feelings. Also, grow up, be an adult, and understand not everyone thinks like you. And that's okay.